This is a list of tips that will help you master Bard without needing to worry about the current patch. This is not a build guide that will become obsolete in 3 days when they update the game. Some of these tips are more difficult than others, and even if you don't see yourself using them right away, it'll help you to keep them in the back of your mind. The first 2 tips are the most advanced, and when combined will make you extremely efficient. The first tip is song canceling. You'll notice that the buff is refreshing on your last click, not when the song completes. The buff is actually refreshed before it even tells you what quality of music you're playing. This leads to a considerable amount of delay before the next song can start. As soon as you perform the last right click on the song, hit cancel and then right click again to start the next song. Here's a quick comparison to show you how much faster it is. As you can see, the difference isn't even close. Now, this is actually a lot less useful than it may first seem. This will only benefit you if you're playing different songs on the same instrument. You may not know, but drawing your sword or swapping items already cancels the song for you. But when used in combination with my next tip, becomes incredibly useful. Tip number 2 is song swapping and is incredibly easy to do. While playing a song, you can still pull up the action wheel and pre-select the next song. For example, while playing Rousing Rhythms, you can pre-select Beats of Alacrity, which will allow you to immediately begin the second song when you finish the first song. Now again, this tip seems a little underwhelming, but when combined with the first tip, allows you to do this. This allows you to play multiple songs on the same instrument with virtually no delay. You can almost think of it as one long song. We can then take it a step further using charismatic performance and note skipping. If you don't know what that is, I'll explain it later in the video. That will allow us to do this. So I start playing the first song, immediately swap to the second song, use charismatic performance to skip the last note, use song canceling to trim the end off the first song, immediately right click again to start the next one, and then again use note skipping to skip the first note. This style of playing will benefit you greatly if you're ever playing multiple songs in a row on the same instrument. Tip number 3 is the previously mentioned note skipping using charismatic performance. This tip is very basic, and I'm not going to go into the details of every single song, but there are a couple mistakes that I see people making that I want to touch on. The first mistake I often see players make is with long, evenly spaced songs like Harmonic Shield. With this song in particular, you have to get 4 perfect notes to be able to skip 2 notes and still get a great performance. I often see players skip the first 2 notes, but that means they have to play the rest of the song perfectly or the performance will fail. Here I skip the first 2 notes, but accidentally get a good on the 3rd note, which makes the song fail. It's just not worth the risk. Skipping the last 2 notes in this case also makes the previously mentioned tech a lot easier. In most other songs, you can just reliably skip the largest note gap. After a few minutes messing around with each song, you'll have it down. Just pay close attention to the ratio of miss, good, and perfect notes you can get while maintaining a great performance. The overall goal of the next few tips is to think less about the music you're playing and more about the combat. With that being said, the 4th tip is to create song subsets. For example, I think Rousing flows nicely into Alacrity, so I will always play those songs together. Another example would be always following up Harmonic Shield with Ballad of Courage. In my mind, I'm almost thinking about them as one song, and with the previous tech, you can play them as one song. Again, the goal here is to give you less to think about, and combining songs does just that. The 5th tip is developing a static rotation and then working into a dynamic one. Having the muscle memory of a static rotation is important for bards of any skill level. Here's an example of a static rotation. I will always play Rousing Rhythms into Beats of Alacrity, into Harmonic Shield, into Ballad of Courage, every single time in that order. And you'll notice that those are the 2 subsets of songs we talked about earlier. So for me, it just feels like I'm playing 2 songs. That is by no means the greatest rotation to use, but it's a start. Ideally, you play the longest duration song first and the shortest last. Trying to keep up all of Bard's buffs can be extremely overwhelming even for good Bard players, but with the muscle memory of your static rotation, you can now think about escape routes in high pressure situations rather than the songs you're playing. If you see any of your buffs getting low and you're not currently fighting, just replay the whole rotation. Once you're fully comfortable with this and you can do it without thinking, you can move to dynamic. Dynamic rotation is as simple as refreshing buffs as they fall off. So if Rousing is still on, but Courage is about to fall off, I'll replace Courage and then Rousing, which is straying from my original static rotation. If you want to be one of the best bards in the game, create a static rotation and then learn the dynamic. But honestly, otherwise, just stick with the static. Another benefit of the static rotation is that you will always end with the same item equipped in your hotbar. For me, that's Flute, so I'm always ready to use Shriek of Weakness. If you need to rebuff quickly, you don't have to fumble through your items because it's always the same button presses. Building on that, you always want to have your items in the same slots. You never want to die or be late to a buff because you were fumbling through your hotkeys looking for the right instrument. Tip number 6 is very simple. You do not have a single song worth taking damage to play. This is the number one thing I see most bards mess up with. If you're ever watching a bard play and they get attacked, usually they'll just try to finish whatever song they're on and then fight back. What you should do is immediately cancel what you're playing, pull out your sword, and start swinging. The number one way to get an enemy off of you is to make him take damage. Even if you're playing a song that's going to debuff him, he's not going to stop swinging if he's just getting free hits on you. Now obviously it's different for every situation, but if you get them to back up and you still have enough health left that you think you can win the fight, your one goal is to apply Shriek of Weakness to them. Once Shriek is applied, you either pretend you're a fighter and you use your rapier and buckler to fight up close, or you pretend you're a ranger and run away spamming crossbow and throwing drums. Tip number 7 and 8 both build on tip number 6. So if your goal is to apply Shriek of Weakness to a target, you should get into the habit of jumping right before you play the song, because you maintain a small amount of move speed that can sometimes save you from taking an extra hit. Honestly, the difference between doing the trick and not doing it are pretty negligible, but it's worth doing just because it can save you. Tip number 8 is understanding your move speed while playing. Another thing that new bards mess up consistently is slowly walking backwards away from a target while playing Shriek of Weakness. This is your default kit move speed while holding a flute, walking forward, left, or right. This is your default kit move speed while playing the flute, walking forward, left, or right. Now this is your default move speed while just walking backwards holding the flute. And even worse is your move speed walking backwards while playing. You can walk sideways while playing the flute faster than you can walk backwards empty-handed. So if you're applying Shriek of Weakness to a target, the worst thing you can do is watch them while you're doing it. You want to walk straight away from them while playing, or sideways. Even better yet would be to incorporate the jump tech we learned earlier with the side strafe. That's definitely not all there is to playing Bard, but those tips will help you get started much faster. I tried to refrain from adding patch-specific tips that could change at any moment, like spamming Clarity to refresh your wizard spell faster, or the fact that Unchained Harmony doesn't apply luck to opening chests. Hopefully some of these tips helped you change your mentality towards what seems to be a very overwhelming class.